Good morning, everyone, or depending on where you're from, it's good afternoon here, almost good evening. Um, if you go to the chat, I've just put a link into the presentation that I'm going to share with you today, because there are some links in there that are that will hopefully be useful to you. And I should hopefully be sharing with you right now also my slides as we go along there for all of you who are maybe a little bit like me, a little bit more of a visual learner. Um, so the title of today is Empowering Global Learners, Harnessing AI Responsibly. And as suggested there's a kind of whole umbrella of things that come under using AI responsibly. And that's essentially what we'll talk about today. So if you click on to the link in the chat, Harnessing AI Responsibly, then you'll be able to um, have a look at some of the links that I've put in there as well. I wanted to make it as interactive as possible. So it mentions that there. I've just started a new job, so I'm currently in Singapore. The last time I spoke to you guys, I was in Scotland because it was my summer holiday. So I'm speaking to you from a very, very sunny Singapore. So good afternoon, good morning. So last time, as I had mentioned, I was speaking about a few different resources that used AI, specifically Flint, ChatGPT, and Canva. So I'm going to build upon what I spoke about last time, but don't worry if you missed that. There is a link there that you can refer to later, but also no worries if you missed it last time. I'm also going to share with you some activities that I did with my students towards the end of last school year. So about that would be about 2-3 months ago. I'm also going to show you how I use AI to help myself as a busy teacher. And lastly, I can take any questions. So today, essentially, we will be focusing on four things. We will be identifying common sources of bias in AI. We'll also be analyzing the environmental impact of AI technologies and discussing sustainable practices. So that kind of comes under that responsible AI learner. We will also be looking at best practices for equitable use in AI education. And lastly, we will be looking at writing effective prompts, which leads in nicely from the sustainable practices because, as we may know, the more you write into ChatGPT, the more water is required to use to cool the data servers. So it's all about writing really effective, concise prompts. ChatGPT doesn't mind if you say please or thank you. And in fact, it's better for the planet if you do not say please or thank you. So just a little review of last time. So it feels like I'm a complete world away from the last time I spoke here. Um, we were talking about Flint and the CEO of Flint was here the last time too, and ChatGPT and Canva. And the things that I kind of discussed last year, I just feel like there has been so much progression since then. And the AI has really been hitting the headlines pretty hard. One of the things that I had mentioned was that I'm really big on staying forward on technologies in terms of being a teacher. There's a lot of chat about, oh no, AI, it's so terrible, da, da, da. But as I tell my students probably weekly, when I was their age, which was an awfully long time ago, Google was picking up use at that time. And, we weren't allowed to use Google in class, and our teachers discouraged us from using it. Well, now I couldn't really think about a world without using Google. I don't think I would have gotten through university without Google, more specifically Google Scholar. So it's really rethinking AI, and as the slide suggests there's a spectrum between human generated and AI generated, and it is, you know, something that is going to be different in different workspaces. Um, so moving on from that, this was one thing that I had adopted in my previous school, whereby it was a traffic light system where I would state whether AI usage was permitted or not. You know, when you're doing summative assessments, and most of the time you're not going to use AI for that. Can I increase the size of my screen? Can I indeed? So when I was practicing sharing this, I could not figure it out. So let me see if I can. Yeah, I don't know if that's good or bad or not. But what you can do, I do apologize if it's too small for your screen. If you go into the chat, I can link it in again, and if you could perhaps view the file that I have. Let me just put that back in there. So here is my slideshow. I'll put that back in the chat there so that you can click on the link. So if you click on that little speech box and go back and perhaps maybe open it up into your own computer there, and you'll be able to see it perfectly. So hopefully that's helpful. The as I had mentioned, a lot of the time we're not using AI. Sometimes they can ask for you, and a lot of the time you can be encouraging students to use AI software. So that is just a really basic traffic light system that you can use in your classroom. And I want to give credit to Flint. I basically copied and pasted that from them. So there's a little link to where you can read about that on their website there as well. The school that I'm currently in is really ahead in AI, and they have a little bit more of a complicated system where it's not just red, orange, and green, but there are about 6 levels, which I do really like as well. And it kind of goes back to this kind of idea here, whereby it's really tricky to incorporate AI in the classroom because it is a spectrum. And it really just depends on the teacher and what they're allowing at the time. So again, building on from last year with regards to Flint, it was a passion project or improvement project of mine whereby I was using Flint AI to help my biology, more specifically IB biology students, improve their extended response scores. So extended response in IB is like your essay question at the end of the exam paper, which often students find really tricky to do. And to put it very plainly, Flint did improve the IB extended response scores. So at the start of the year, they did some practices on paper, and then afterwards they would use Flint, which has essentially a chatbot that I had programmed, giving it specific IB resources to pull its feedback from. And by the end of the year, their scores had improved. So I think if I remember rightly, my target was 20% and ended up being like 50%. So it was definitely very useful. So I encourage you to use Flint there. And over this past year, as you can see there, it's really expanded on its services, whereby I would use the content upload, this one here, to upload what I had been teaching in class so that it's referring directly to that. Interestingly, I do teach a lot of students whose mother tongue is not English, so it does have translation services there that can be very helpful. It's got the most up-to-date GPT, and incorporates text to speech and speech to text, which is awesome. moving on from Flint there. Some other examples of progress in the past year. We all know ChatGPT, but here are some other really useful ones that I wanted to make available to you. The link's on the top corner there. I specifically, as a science teacher, love SciSpace. One of my students actually introduced me to SciSpace, to be very honest. I did not find out that one by myself. Um, but SciSpace is really great. And then on the other end of the spectrum in terms of education, you've got creative writing there and Canva. You have data analysis. These are awesome. Okay, lots of great resources that I encourage you to use for your student researchers. So moving on. One thing that was really useful to me this year in terms of making, specifically for me, it was slide presentations. So when I first started teaching about 20 years ago, um, I used to like making slides because it made me go over the content. But, many years later, I'm still using a lot of the same slides, to be honest. They don't look that great. So you can use ChatGPT and Canva together in order to create these beautiful slides. So that's what I had used it mainly for. Um, and we'll kind of touch upon this later as well, but you can also prompt it to create lesson plans, student worksheets, and so on and so forth. So if you're able at a later date to click on that link there, there's a really nice tutorial that will help you to do that, which is essentially what I had used myself. So that's just a little recap of what I did last year and my year since then. What I would like to introduce to you today is some student activities that really could be used in any subject. So I'm biology and science, so it does have a somewhat of a biology and science theme, but I used it at the end of the year once a lot of the content was done and you kind of have these so-called filler lessons. But I found it to be really important, and the students really enjoyed it as well. I actually remember one day I'd taken all my artwork done, my lab was ready to go for the next teacher to come in, and therefore my windows were super open, and my superintendent was walking past, and the students were just super engaged. They were like all huddling around me. We had this like beautiful slide on the screen, and they had paper and they were sharing things. I was really happy. I thought, okay, I can leave on a good note. So these are some student activities which, if you click on this link here, using that one, it will take you directly to the lessons. So as you can see here, this one here is from the Economist Foundation. They've got some great resources, which I'm just going to talk about some of them today, and I've not gotten around to using all of them. But one of my kind of passion projects is bias, and just in all matter of the terms bias, I'm always teaching students to be anti-bias, I suppose. And so I had adapted this specific lesson plan with a huge range of students. So I did it to grade 9 through to 12. And I used pretty much the same plan. I just kind of changed the outcome, or the expectations of the outcome somewhat. But essentially, it's a lesson talking about how AI is biased towards racial and ethnic groups, more specifically women, or lower socioeconomic groups, people with disabilities, non-English speakers, or non-standard dialects. We spoke about that last year. Religious and cultural minorities, as well as certain geographic regions. And so the first thing I did, it was very straightforward, as you can see here. I had asked them to choose an AI program, and I gave them some prompts that they can use, especially like a sentence starter. Um, and they had to essentially ask that AI program to produce an image of their family based on a description. So they could say, I mean, if it was me, for example, I would say I'm a family of three. Oh, um, yes, you can download it. If you scroll up a little bit, there is a link. It says Harnessing AI Responsibly. You can download it from there. If you're having issues, let me know. So yeah, I had asked them to make an image of their family to see what AI wanted to do. Most of the students used ChatGPT because it was the quicker one. Some used Gemini, but it was taking a little while for it to produce the picture. And then so they had to put that image in there. And then they also had to bring an actual image of their family. So this is a really nice activity as well as covering bias, but also you get to see pictures of their family. You can ask them questions. So a lot of the pictures I got were pictures where they're on holiday. Where were you at this point? Like, what did you like about this place? So it's really good for connecting with your students. So even though I used it at the end of the year, it would probably be a really good one to use at the start of the year, actually. Now, the third point there is asking for them in their own words to explain the differences between the two images. And some of my classes had a little bit more time than others. So we did it again with a different AI program. And what I will mention is, well, I'll come to that in a minute, is they were then able to compare and contrast the bias of two different programs. And then the last one there that a lot of the older students got onto is they chose the program that they felt was least biased, and I asked them to improve their prompt based upon what they had just investigated. So I can't wait to show you some of the work that we got. So this one was my example to the class. I am originally from a small town in Scotland, and I'm married with a 5-year-old daughter. ChatGPT last year, when I had done this, did not ask for further prompts. So as you can see here, they're specifically asking for hair color, skin tone, ethnicity, clothing style, and setting, which I love. I think this is a great addition to ChatGPT because it's not assuming what I look like. Now, I do look like a standard person that comes from this town in Scotland. But as I was saying to my students, my best friend, she's originally from South Africa of Indian descent. And she grew up in that same town as well. And therefore, if she was to generate a picture, this would not look like her family. And so it was just kind of getting them to think like that. So this is why I had prompted, no, please just create one based upon what the average family from there looks like. So in other words, what ChatGPT, what it has in its data store. As you can see, the picture that came up here is quite accurate. A white family, dark brown hair. That actually does look like my daughter a little bit. I can repost the slides for you again, no worries. I'll just do that just now. They're here. There we go. So I've just reposted those slides again. Alrighty. And so what's interesting though is it's not super reliable in where it is. So actually, interestingly, the town behind it is, I think, another town where actually my husband's grandparents are from. It actually looks like their house behind there. But not too far, maybe about 20 miles down the road. So this particular image created is by AI. This is not me. Good question. You can't tell because it does look very similar. Now, I'm going to show you the next one. So this is an AI generated image, okay, from one of my students. He was Malaysian, so he had mentioned that. Now, this is the picture that he got, and underneath there is his explanation. Okay, I cut and paste. I didn't write this. So he had said the AI program assumed I was of Malay descent, despite me being of Indian descent. It is assumed that I live in a kampung. So just to explain what a kampung is, that is like a traditional village in Malaysia. So this picture on the top left-hand corner is what's known as a longhouse. Not very many people where we stayed lived in them anymore. And in fact, this student stayed in a gigantic, super modern house. So he doesn't live in a kampung. And it also assumed that he was a particular ethnicity and religion, even though that he is specifically Hindu. Okay, so that was really interesting. And so he was like, hey, are there any pictures in AI with regards to Indian families? So he improved his prompt and he didn't get what he needed, and he had to sit for a long time and then explain to ChatGPT, I am Malaysian, but I am from Indian descent, therefore I'm Indian Malaysian. And he had to describe what his family looked like before he got a good image. And as I had said to him, you are giving ChatGPT information right now, and hopefully that will be stored in there to further improve. Okay, so we'll move on to the next one. So very similarly, um, this was one of my lovely students. I have put smiley faces to, I asked for permission to use this picture and they said yes, but I said I would put smiley faces over their actual smiley faces to keep it anonymous. So this top question, this top image here is the image that AI had generated for her. So she is originally from India, but she was living in Malaysia. And as you can see here, doesn't look anything like above. So the buildings here are almost like slum-like, whereas here it's a very, very modern city vibe. And their clothes are somewhat different. And even though she did say, you know, sometimes they do wear clothes like that, I'm not all of the time. And so, as she has stated here, it says it's very stereotypical with Indian clothing and India in the background. But she's usually wears Western clothes. Yeah. So that was a very interesting one as well, kind of similar to the last one there. We will move on to this one here. Now, this is a little bit different. So this is actually an image generated by two different students. The top image here is generated by a student from China, and an image here is generated by a student from South Korea. And both of them had put in that they were from China and South Korea. Now, as you can see here, the images are almost identical. So in other words, a ChatGPT is essentially saying that people in China and people in South Korea all look the same. Okay. Now, this is an answer from one of my students, okay, who felt that they looked nothing like, this was specifically a Chinese student, so referring to this top image there, he felt he didn't look anything like them. He doesn't mention it there, but the conversation I had with him in class, he said my skin is much paler, it's more white rather than yellow hued. He felt he had larger eyes, and so therefore he felt it was more stereotypical. So huge bias in images in ChatGPT. The next activity I did, and it was to get them to start thinking about why ChatGPT is biased. So it was a little bit of a more of a deep dive. There were two groups. One group, I gave them this set of information, and then the other group, I gave them this set of information. Okay, so obviously this set of information is more detailed than this one here. Now, what happened as a result is we got two completely different image generations. And I kind of linked that into the fact that ChatGPT is working with what it's got. And therefore, we have to consider that the information on the internet and wherever it's pulling from is also bias. And they were like, okay. And that's when it really hit home that they understood that the image that they had just made was as a result of generally how people are in the world, unfortunately. And so it was a little bit of a lesson to the students. Try and be anti-biased. Don't judge a book by its cover. If some person has a specific nationality, you cannot tarnish them with one brush. It was a really interesting conversation. And so we finished up that lesson having a look at two different videos. One of them was a peaceful assembly of students, and another one was a protest over politics. So at some point, if you want, and you can use these in your classrooms as well, this YouTube video here shows students who are African American, and they're peacefully it's a peaceful assembly. They're not even calling it a protest. They produced a peaceful assembly to voice their concerns over one of their peers who was wrongfully arrested the week before at school. And as a result, the police stormed the school. It was super violent, and the students were saying, like, we were trying to be peaceful. This is our right. Now, forward to this video here, where it's an actual protest over politics right outside a government building. There's a clear difference in the people that are there. So the majority of these people are white. The police are speaking with them. They are asking them questions about their protest. Essentially, this led me to say that data states that in the US specifically, African American have more violent arrests than white Americans. Now, I had said to them that data is biased, and here's the evidence. Now, the reason there are more violent arrests is because there's bias in the police force. And so it again linked it back to AI. If we are biased in the real world, then of course AI is going to be biased also. So I love that lesson. That was right up my street. It starts off quite soft and ends with a real kick. So another activity I did with the slightly older students were they were given trail cards, and it basically had scenarios, and there's links to the trail cards in that slide there. You can get them directly from there. They're beautiful. You just need to either upload them or print them and cut them out. They're absolutely beautiful. And again, if we kind of go in here, this was a deeper dive here, and this is student work, which is I've kept anonymous. It mentions here that if AI bots learned biases against non-white or African people, real criminals that don't fit stereotypes might be able to escape. Now, this was based on the fact that AI is currently being used in the criminal justice system in different countries. And obviously, if there's bias in the real world, there's bias in AI, there's bias in these systems. And so it really got the students thinking, oh, that's a little bit scary. Because I'm saying, oh, AI is great. This is why we're talking about it. But at the same time, there's a lot of bias. Yeah, not just with police force and justice systems, but also in medical cases as well. As it mentions here, medical cases have more concern over young males. So there's a little bit of a gender issue there as well. A couple of other points that were interesting from another group there is that it mentions here, in my thoughts, it mentioned I would rate this as an 8 to 9 because AI learning can cause lack of learning in certain human situations. So we were talking about, for example, the fact that AI can be used in medicine, and they were a little bit worried. They were thinking, well, are doctors still going to go to university? Are they still going to learn about diseases and different kinds of things? So they thought that was quite scary. In other words, that's essentially what that's saying there. So I really could have talked a whole hour about this. I'm a little bit I'm looking at my time here. I'm going to have to start pinging through this. These are top names in AI bias. Ken Shelton was really the guy who got me onto this. And his kind of person was Jean Darnell, and there's a couple of other names there as well. I'm going to move on. We also looked at AI and sustainability, and essentially, again, some really beautiful resources in that link there. I was getting them to think about who should be using AI. Now, it's been in the media this year that AI requires vast amounts of water. Okay. It's not good for the environment. Therefore, I said to them, okay, who deserves to use AI then? So I got them to look at it in terms of different lenses. Okay. So we did a little kind of pre-knowledge test. As you can see here, they didn't do so great, which is what I expected. And then what I did was I gave them these cards here. So notice we're doing AI work, but we're not actually using AI. Hopefully you can see that there. And they had to make a diamond shape, whereby they felt the most important one was at the top and the least important was at the bottom there. I got some really interesting answers. So this was essentially, they did this in their groups, and I said, okay, and I didn't give very much input. And then I said, okay, you're now allowed to go and look at all the other groups. And when they did that, I was then giving them some conversations here. So interestingly, we've got science at the top here. And one thing that actually was surprising to me was that a lot of them put, I am a farmer. They thought that was really important. And I loved that. And I asked them, why is that? And they said, well, farmers, they've got like so much technology. They've got to think about, the conditions for plants. They're harvesting different plants. And I thought that was a really mature and well evaluated answer there. There was no right or wrong answer. It was just all about getting them to discuss. So this was a group who chose this. And then after discussion, they decided to change it up a little bit. So they put doctor up at the top here, farmer still up here, online shopper they felt was not worthy of using AI. I really loved that particular one. We could have spent a whole hour talking about that, as could the students. And this was their exit ticket. They had to place their, I'll just kind of maybe go out there a little bit. They had to place their name where they felt after that lesson they were in terms of their views on sustainability. So I talked about the views of a climate activist, the views of Bill Gates, and the views of Kate Brandt. And so, as you can see here, most of them are round about Kate Brandt. Interestingly, we have some near Bill Gates, who's obviously most AI appreciative, if you like. The sustainability officer essentially was saying, we need to think about sustainability, but we also need to be able to use AI and keep up to date with our technologies. So that was also a really nice lesson, which again, I mean, I did it in biology, chemistry, but I feel that there's reading, there's writing, there's talking, there's a lot of language in there, so it can be used in a lot of different contexts. Bearing in mind, I got this from The Economist as well. So there is a lot more information that I could talk about today in terms of sustainability. So I've given you some high hitters, if you like. We've got MIT in there, which you may have, which you should have may have heard of. So a lot of nice resources there. This particular lesson was to get them to essentially think about how to use AI responsibly. And I asked them to draft up a responsible use AI policy, if you like. Now, this was, I think this was the second last or the last day of school. They were really good sports. And I think because they really enjoyed the bias and the sustainability stuff, they did a good job on this. I wasn't looking for a booklet. I was looking for a really nice, to the point visual that could be used to help them think about how to use AI responsibly. So we had gone over things such as hallucinations, deep fakes, and we talked about academic integrity. It was something that I'd engraved in the class the whole year, so we didn't go hugely into that. But this is one that I thought was really nice from one of my students. She made, what would that be called? A mnemonic brick, whereby it was boost, remember, investigate, critically evaluate, and also keep your information private. Now, that last one there, in terms of keeping their information private, was interesting because they hadn't really thought about the information that they had been giving AI. I said to them, so for example, if you're using your Google username or whatever, I said to them, I was like, even though it's really useful to build up your account with AI, because then they get used to what you like and what you want from AI. I was like, a lot of the time I still don't log in because I don't want it to have any of my personal details. We don't know what they're going to do with this data. That's still a question that's still quite up in the air. And so it was just really important for me to remind the students to be very careful with their information. It's a chat bot, yes, it's not a real person, but if you were speaking to a real person on Roblox or Discord or whatever, would you be sitting there giving away your information? Kind of thing. So this was just a really nice visual that one of the students made to help the other students remember what to do when they're using AI and how to use it responsibly. This kind of spilled into my IB biology. So as you can see here, I started off our biology student on her internal assessment journey before I left. And so the internal assessment is 20% of the final score. It's essentially a experiment that they carry out, and then they write up a scientific report on it. This was the first time I had used AI in the planning process. So I've got a very scaffolded planning process to help the students, because it's a tough assessment, especially now. The standards for biology IAs in particular are like university level. And so the planning stage is really important. And so what I had asked her here, so this is her work right here. I will zoom in on it here. So these, oops, my bad. These were empty boxes that she filled in. So that first one there, just so that we could home in on what she's interested in. She wanted to be a doctor, or she still wants to be a doctor. And so she chose topics from the biology content that were relevant to her. And so she chose these 4 topics, and I thought, okay, let's go and have a look at the content. Okay, and then from reading the content, we hadn't even actually covered all those topics, to be honest, but we went through the textbook. I said, from that, come up with some ideas for just what to study. It doesn't have to be detail orientated. And some of them were as a result of what we had done in class. So we had done some goat dissections, because there's a local goat farm which is super sustainable near us, where I had gotten some tissues for biology samples. So that was one that she was really interested in. She definitely wanted to work on some sort of animal tissue. And it's really tricky with IB because they have so many rules and regulations, especially with regards to animal tissue and animal cruelty and all of that. So bearing that in mind, she used AI to put in these topics to come out with ideas that have a little bit more of a direction. Now, this student was the one that told me about this. So in ChatGPT, when you log in, you can go to the different GPTs, which I was aware of because I'd used the Canva one, as I'd mentioned earlier on today. So there was actually a biology IA specific one that a biology teacher, who I now know of after researching and making sure it was reliable, had created. So she used this. It was called, at the bottom there, it mentions ChatGPT IA assistant, and she came up with these 4 ideas here. And lo and behold, she is now working, or she had been working on, unfortunately, she's got another teacher now, but I'm still in touch with her mum. She's doing a good job. As you can see here, she ended up choosing number 4. So it was, how does freezing goat muscle tissue prior to digestion affect it? And so this is really relevant to Malaysia, where she's situated, because goat meat is it's called oh my goodness, I've forgotten my Malaysian already. Kambing is what it's called. Kambing is used in a lot of Malaysian dishes, so very relevant as well. So I was very, very proud of her there for coming up with that. Now notice that I haven't at one point encouraged her to use it to write her actual scientific investigation. She came up with ideas and her topics, and she used AI to assist her in pulling out more specific ideas. And that was it. That's all we used it for. And as it mentions there, she will acknowledge ChatGPT, IBIA assistant, in her bibliography, in her IA when she submits it, which is essentially what the IB are asking for. So we are coming on to the last part here. I'm keeping an eye on time. One thing that some teachers had asked me last year was how I specifically used it in my planning. So using the sustainability chat that I had talked about today, it's really important to be very specific in your prompts. You don't want to be constantly writing in your prompts. You want to think about the environment and your effect on it. But at the same time, we're going to use AI to help us, aren't we? So make sure your prompts have a purpose, a role. You're looking for a specific output, and so on and so forth. So that's just a really nice visual for your prompts there. So I put in some examples of how I had used it. So I do use it for report card comments. There are some teachers who will completely disagree with me, but I want to show you essentially how I used it here. So I'd given it prompts on in terms of that specific student, and it came out with just some really nice sentences that I had then used in, but I didn't copy and paste. And that's my point here. And it's the same point that I say to the students. We've got to make sure that it's personable for the students when we're writing report card comments. But at the same time, when we're on our 25th report card comment and we feel like we've said the same thing over and over again, it might be that AI will give you it in a better way on how to say it. So it's used for kind of similar before, idea generation. I wouldn't encourage copying and pasting for report card comments. It's also really nice, as it mentions here, for making directions clearer. So in both
Hi, Lisa.
hi.
Hi, yeah. So I think it's time for the next session. If you
Awesome.
can take in a minute to just wrap it up here, please.
Sure, no worries. I will leave
All
those
right, thank
prompts
you.
with you. They're really, really straightforward. And you will be able to use my slides to kind of help you with those prompts. But I really wanted to just put in there that just make sure your prompts are super specific so that you don't have to keep changing them. Now, with all of that, I'm finishing up on my last slide there. It's a really nice quote from the CEO of Google. The future of AI is not about replacing humans, it's about augmenting human capabilities. And so I just want to mention that the importance in education is not AI, it's about those interactions with your students, as you can see here. These were photos over the past year. So even though I have been using AI in my classroom and teaching, I get the students outside, I get them in the lab, we do a lot of group work. And that's what's really important. And AI should help you with that, essentially. Thank you very much, everyone. I'm going to go through and just double check that in case I've missed any questions, but essentially that's for me today. Thank you very much, everyone. It's been a joy.